I want to talk about, though, the threat from those countries, the hot zone, to this country, because one of the big issues, of course, is this idea of the travel ban. And I want to talk to Congressman Murphy about it. The idea of a travel ban from those three countries to the United States. Congressman Murphy, this is what President Obama said this week.
Trying to seal off an entire region of the world, if that were even possible, could actually make the situation worse.
Congressman Murphy, why is the president wrong?
Well, look, first of all, the president has sealed off Israel in the past. We've sealed off other areas temporarily. We can have travel restrictions until we get the rest right, and the rest is not right. The assumptions that they have, for example, that it will lead to some collapse of this economy in Africa, I don't agree with. The idea we can't get goods and supplies, and that's totally false. We shipped hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies into Germany during the Berlin airlift, and the idea that people are not going to travel unless we put on a ban is absurd. People are already migrating and moving all over Africa now for jobs and temporary work. They do that now. We can trace passports, we can look at things, but this idea of only using fever scans and asking people to be honest, we know that those are two more assumptions that the CDC has that are not true. And if you're going to restore faith in the American people and stop panic, right, you've got to be more accurate here.
Well, let me bring in Mr. Osterholm, because as I discussed with Dr. Fauci, the fact is that a number, I think 24 African nations have restricted travel from the so-called hot zone, which raises the question, should we?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Just because somebody takes an action doesn't mean it's right. I believe that Congressman Murphy is well-intended in his assessment here, and surely it makes some sense. But we've actually looked at this issue quite closely over the years, and you've already led this program with saying that I've been critical of our response, and I am, about how slow we have been to respond in Africa. I would have no problem saying that the thing to do is close the border if we could really protect this country from what's happening over there. That's just not the case. And this is not a partisan issue, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue. Just this past week, former Secretary Mike Leavitt of HHS under the Bush administration, somebody I very much respect and admire, himself came out and said from his own experience, having been at HHS and reviewing all the information available,
why is a travel ban a bad idea?
Well, the travel ban is a bad idea in part because of the fact that we really don't effectively stop people from getting into this country. And for what? I mean, and what I'm talking about here is we've had one single case so far in the big picture of what the situation is. Maybe we stop another one and two more. But we do know that travel bans will seriously impact our ability to get people in and out of that area. And Congressman, with all due respect, I agree with you on the Berlin airlift. But that was all military. If you're prepared today to give us hundreds of military planes that will fly in and out at will when we need them to move not only material but also people, when we move them around, then I'll say, well, maybe we ought to reconsider this. But I don't see anybody in Congress telling us today that we're going to get hundreds of military planes.
Congressman Murphy?
Well, I've already asked Dr. Frieden and sent a letter to President Obama saying, tell us whatever Congress needs to authorize. We're sending thousands of troops over there through ships, through also planes. We could do a lot here. I mean, the ability of the U.S. military to move goods and supplies is pretty massive. We all want to stop Ebola in Africa, but we also don't want it to come here. And even if people talk about, well, one more case, you know, it means a lot to the family of someone who dies in the United States, and it means a lot to the safety and security of Americans. And so let's focus on concentrating our efforts to stop it in Africa, but let's also make sure that we're protecting America's borders from it coming in here too.
All right, finally, Mr. Osterholm, you say that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and that we are barely at the 1 mile mark in our fight against Ebola. I certainly understand that in Africa, but you also say it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Are you saying that about the U.S. too?
Well, as long as this forest fire is burning in Africa and it potentially spreads eastward into some of the larger other cities in Africa, yeah, we're going to see these sparks flying up. Do I think that we will get it right in the United States? We will handle these cases very effectively, that we will protect healthcare workers? Yes, I do. But what I think we're not talking about is the devastation that this is causing in Africa, not just in human lives, but the actual from a security standpoint. If this moves eastward, as we believe it now might, just by people walking in on foot, not being checked at borders or not getting on airplanes, the potential that this has to destabilize all of Africa is huge. Ask anyone in the intelligence community what that means in terms of potential safe havens for terrorists, etc. We have to do more.
Right.
And Congressman, I would love to have you take a look at why are we not seeing more troops on the ground? Why are our supplies not arriving in these affected countries? Why is the rest of the world not responding? That's what we need to keep our eye on right now, and we need a vaccine. Congressman, I hope you'll help us get that vaccine, because in the end, that's the only magic bullet that's going to stop this whole thing. And that right now rests largely in the hands of the United States.